This episode of the podcast is brought to you by NutraBio, with no compromise since 1988, no proprietary blends and nothing but clinical dosages, as well as some of the best flavorings on the market. NutraBio has whatever you need, regardless of your sport or transformation. Use code word NATTY at checkout to save 10%. Well, Merry Christmas to all you muscle mamas and your bicep peak papas. Guess what? It's time for another episode of the U-Natty States of America, and in this first two-parter that we're producing this week, we're here to talk about the online coaching epidemic. And part one is, your coach is a fraud. This one hits close to home because obviously the vast majority of my clients are online, and the majority of my funds that I get to pay for my bills and give to my wife so that she can do whatever it is that she does with it is made from online coaching. So realistically, this one for me is not just a very personal issue, but one that I actually see as the most major of issues that we have in the fitness industry today in terms of damage that could be done to the general population. Why is that? Well, realistically, nowadays, not everybody has enough time to go to a vetted personal trainer that's at a gym that can show me their degree and show me their certificates and has a client base that can vouch for them. So we go to social media. Well, it's a lot easier to do something on your own time and send some videos and ask someone some questions when you might not understand why a diet is set up a certain way. So online coaching tends to be the preference for a lot of people, right? The issue is that the anonymity of the coach, even if they're enormously famous, can be very, very well hidden. So, first thing that we want to talk about is the other side of the spectrum in terms of coaches. The first time you ever do a show, you go all the way through it and you say, I did it, I got last place, got this sweet medal, very excited to go home and show my family, and also open my coaching business. Guys, listen, just having done your first show or your first adventure race or your first fat loss transformation does not qualify you to understand what it takes to coach other people through that. Well, how do you know when it's time to actually be able to tell people you could do that? Realistically, there is no sweet spot where all of a sudden the little turkey popper pops up and you know that you're well-versed enough and that you're going to do something safe enough that you could tell people how to progress in their fitness journey without the possibility of majorly injuring them by giving them the wrong information. But what you have to understand is that if there's pieces of your prep or pieces of what happened during your prep in terms of your body that you don't fully understand, you may not be able to identify that in someone else. So let's use a specific example. Let's say I'm bodybuilding person A, and I go all the way through my prep, and right toward the end, most of my cuts disappeared. I got really stressed out, and I felt really crappy. My sleep kind of was shitty, and then out of nowhere, I just really looked 6 weeks out, even though a couple weeks beforehand, I looked even better. If you don't know how to troubleshoot cortisol spikes or possibilities in your salt intake being wrong, or, your only recourse for that is to give people distilled water instead of asking the questions about electrolytes or the sleep schedule and measuring time in REM sleep for reset of metabolic hormones and all this other stuff, someone else may have the same issues that you do, and you're just going to think, well, that's part of prep. What if it's not? In fact, what if it's something more indicative of some serious health consequences? Issues with compartment syndrome, or the fact that you've already cut their calories too low and their body is starving so much that it's starting to burn their muscle, and you might even wind up giving them, poisoning their liver because their muscles are breaking down. Now, I understand that most people, as it relates to sickness during bodybuilding, are very concerned with overtraining, and that at any point in time they think that they're poisoning themselves with their muscle breakdown. It's very, very difficult to reach that point, but it's not impossible, and it is relatively life-threatening. So If what you're worried about is those things, you're going to be paying careful attention to feedback loops that you're getting from your clients. Okay, well, if you don't know to look for those feedback loops, and look, realistically, if you don't know when to tell your client, hey, look, enough is enough, you need to focus more on your general health and we need to figure out what's going on here, which new coaches tend not to do because it basically signals to them that the coach either doesn't know what they're talking about or is trying to milk the money out of them, which realistically that's not the case. You really need to understand that you're not just playing a video game where you're trying to get this package to the most elite level so that this person can give you a trophy in your trophy case. They're people. They're human beings. And their health is very important. And if you do the wrong thing with it, you could be in for some very serious consequences. So trust me, if you've only done one of whatever it is that you're falling into in terms of your category, like I said, a Spartan races, Tough Mudders, bodybuilding shows, fitness competitions in terms of powerlifting, strongman, you don't know what you're doing after the first show to just say, I know enough now to coach other people to do it. So then let's double back and talk about some of those sport specialties. Like I said, powerlifting, strongman, all of these things require very specific caloric intakes, spikes during the peak, and differences in those things can change the weigh-in, which may change the division in which that person who you may be coaching is going to compete in. The reason why that's an issue is if you do this incorrectly, you might not just be playing with their placing on the podium, but very seriously playing with their health. People vastly underestimate if I'm 6'1" and I weigh 245 and my strength is, let's say a 1,600 total in powerlifting, which is pretty good. If I'm expecting them to PR at the meet, and I don't know what I'm doing in terms of calculating those macros, your fats, your carbohydrates, your protein sources, you might not just tank their total, but the realistic thing that you have to understand is that they're under these enormous weight loads that most people would never, and I mean never, think to attempt in a gym with the correct safeties, that they might not realize, okay, I've done this before in the gym, I've done this in training, I'm peaking for my meet, I need to go to 102% 2 weeks before the meet because I want to make sure that I'm able to handle the platform and handle the weight load that I have for my second and third attempts. And there's no more gas in the tank. You could very seriously injure these people, not just with, like I said, their muscles breaking down and poisoning their liver, any of these other issues that you would have in terms of underfeeding people. But if that gas disappears at the wrong time and that barbell moves at the wrong speed or the wrong angle and velocity, you really may injure them in terms of breaking bones, tearing ligaments, tendon issues. Trust me, just because you bench well and you entered a bodybuilding show does not mean that you know what you're doing in terms of powerlifting. So understand that sport specialty is very, very important in breaking down whether or not you or your coach know what you're talking about. So, how do I know that I or my coach know what they're talking about, right? We take a look at certificates. We take a look at NASM, ACE, ISSA, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, all the way up to PhD levels when you take a look at people like Lane Norton. I believe that, Dr. Mike Israetel, obviously. So what we're really taking a look at in terms of certificates is the knowledge base that it's going to provide you in terms of understanding stimulus and response and understanding proper block periodization, proper nutrient density. There's an intense amount of variables that go into this. So we're taking a look at all these variables and we say, okay, how do I know which certificate is best? Look, truth be told, I know plenty of people who went to college for sports physiology and kinesiology and really couldn't tell you the difference between the macronutrients. Why is that? Well, simply because not only are most organizations in terms of academia in America built where they're money machines, they're also made to teach you how to pass tests. And until you get to graduate school and postgraduate school, the level of them really understanding if you're going to be able to perform in your field of choice is very limited. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So, if we take a look at these certifying bodies in terms of the ISSA and NASM and things like that, NASM has a proctored exam, ACE and the ISSA do not. I would also argue that even with a proctored exams for certified personal trainers or even specialists in terms of nutrition or sports-specific training, you're trying to learn a very small subset of information so that you can pass this test and call yourself a beginner in being able to coach that aspect of it. I actually wound up getting elite level trainers from the ISSA. I've sat in a proctored NASM exam, and I've gone to graduate school for kinesiology. But the problem is, having that doesn't mean you're an expert yet. Having that means that you now have built enough knowledge base where you can start to take a look at things with a different perspective, and that perspective is one that now understands the vast amount of information that has to go into a decision and where you should look at those changing metrics in terms of causation versus correlation, or degrees of freedom, and how to read scientific studies and journals, and then really looking at things that could be possibilities in terms of positive and negative feedback, right? Just because your coach has X doesn't mean they can tell you how to get to Y and Z. It's a great start, and I have always said that education is key in any field, but understand that it's the beginning. It's the reason why a lot of times when people come out of college, companies want them to go through an extensive certification process in their own organization, because all it's telling you is the basics. How to apply that when and how to alter it at certain times is only going to be known when you start to learn the specifics of your sport and the specifics of your clients. So, those metrics are coming in for my clients now. Hey, I see that this person's having issues sleeping. I now need to understand how they're going to alter their schedule so that we can keep them safe. The problem is, on both sides of the aisle here in terms of coach and client, reply timing matters. So, since we're talking about the coaching side of it, let's say I'm a client and I'm messaging my coach, and I have seen this done before, and I see it every couple of months with somebody who comes from a different coaching style and comes to me. Their number one thing that they say is a major issue is, I would message my coach and tell them I was having issues, and they wouldn't get back to me for another week. I know life happens, and I know that we're all busy, and that even though this is our business, that coaching sometimes means that it's not exactly time sensitive. But there are time sensitive periods where you really should be getting back to people much faster. So if my client reaches out to me and says, hey, my work schedule has changed, I need to know if I need to alter my lifting schedule, and should my meal timing change, or should my meal setup change in terms of macronutrient levels, and where do I want to put my pre-workout, my post-workout, that kind of thing. Now, we could talk all day in terms of regular bodybuilding and nutrient timing being bullshit, but that's not really what this is all about. When we take a look at reply timing, I've actually had a horror story from someone where they messaged their coach, said that there was an issue, and the coach only emailed them back to say, I'm only going to answer you on check-in days, which is on Sundays. That's bananas to me. You took the time to answer a client only to tell them, I don't have time to answer you right now. That's crazy to me. So online coaching has a major issue in the sense that barrier between the client and the coach needs to be overcome in terms of really understanding boundaries, right? I don't want to take a phone call at 2 a.m. when someone's just wondering which bar they should use for deadlifting when it can wait. But at the same time, if somebody's saying, I feel like I'm coming down with something and tomorrow's supposed to be leg day, or let's say I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show and it's supposed to be my last leg day before the contest, should I go in and do it even though I feel like I'm coming down with the fever? And that person either doesn't answer you or purposefully tells you they won't answer you. That's an issue. Because imagine that it was the same scenario, but that was an in-person client, and they came to the coach in the gym and said, I'm not feeling really well, what should I do? And the coach looked at them and said, look, you have the plan, and you're not supposed to check in with me in terms of weight and stuff until Sunday, so get the fuck out of here. they would fire them immediately. But the anonymity and this barrier with email and Instagram and Facebook Messenger makes it seem like, oh, well, they're probably just really busy. Rest assured that we are. Even myself as a coach, I have a ruling with my clients where I say if it's an emergency, tag the beginning and the end of the message with the word emergency. So whether or not I see it pop up on my phone notifications or I'm going to Messenger and scrolling through client messages or emails, it will tell me it's urgent and I will click that first before I do anything else. But if it's not that, within 24 to 30 hours, every message and every email should have an answer. That's my standard. I'm not saying that has to be every coach's standard. But I found over the last 7, 8, 10 years, that works for most people. If you can get back to them within a business day or on the weekend, as long as it's not, you're sick or you're out on vacation with your family, relatively within 30 hours is a very reasonable response time. Most coaches, even if you have 50 to 70 clients, can sit down for 2 hours every other day and answer all the emails and text messages they may have. So understand that if you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering, well, how do I know when my coach's response time is too low? If there's multiple times in a month that you're asking questions and you hit the same workout day again before getting that answer, it's probably a red flag. 24 to 30 hours is a very reasonable response time. And if you're trying to coach other people, you need to be ready to have that response time availability. Because if you don't, then your schedule is too busy and maybe you just shouldn't coach people. Now, when we ask ourselves the variance in the population that's going to come to us as coaches, one of the really important things is health variance. What works for some is not going to work for all. I took on clients for about 15 months pro bono before I ever took my first paid client, and that was after going through 3 separate certification processes, doing my own bodybuilding prep for a while, and then picking the brains of the 3 top coaches that I knew at the time who were friends of mine in how they would do something and why. And I still went to college after that to get my master's degree in exercise science. So, to understand the intricacies of things like PCOS or fibromyalgia or, what to do in late stage pregnancy or middle stage pregnancy even for that matter, when it's really time to cut out certain things that most people can handle, like rice and gluten, heavy starches, what deficit is too low based on medications they're taking, and even side effects of certain medications in terms of how they're going to pass waste, how they're going to absorb nutrients, certain nutrient densities that are required to make sure that the medications are absorbed correctly. If someone comes to you and says that they're on a specific medication or they have a specific illness, the coach needs to know all of the possible intricacies of misdiagnosing issues with their diet and workout that may be perceived as side effects of the medication or the disease. Both are possibilities, but if you really can't decipher which is which, it's okay as a coach to say, this is too complicated of a case for me. I think that someone else would probably be better suited to help you in your fitness needs. We as coaches need to understand that it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm going to look up the answer and I'm going to get back to you. But if I can't find the answer or the answer is too complicated, I'm not just going to take this person's safety, time, and money into my hands thinking I'll figure it out along the way. We won't. And there's a chance that you won't figure it out even after you've seriously affected this person's life. If it's too complicated and you can't figure it out and you have nowhere to go for information that makes sense to you, pass the person off to someone who does know what they're doing. I've had these issues brought up to me from major coaches on social media where they say, I believed them and I trusted them because their social media following was so positive and so large, I never thought that they would have the availability to lie to me or that they didn't know what they were talking about. I call it the too big to fail fallacy, where the coach is so well known and so famous or has such a large following that there's no way that they would jeopardize their entire career or their identity on social media and with their other clients by lying. Listen, we thought the same thing about banks. Subprime mortgages proved otherwise, right? We really have to know that as social media gets bigger, it can be very easy to put up a facade that makes a lot of people feel really safe and really secure in the information that you're starting to present. Look, take me for example. I know I look big and bad and like a huge giant god among men. I'm only 5'5", and I weigh 165 pounds on a great day. Trust me that social media is a great shield. By the way, that was sarcasm if you guys did. I know I'm going to get roasted in the comment section. I don't care. It's a joke. Anonymity on social media is dangerous in the sense that just because their following is 300,000 does not mean that their knowledge base is strong enough to be able to coach every one of those 300,000. I know there are plenty of degreed, PhD coaches that would look at certain clients and go, this is not in my wheelhouse, I'm out, right? So, as we bring this episode to a close, we then have to say to ourselves, how do I know that this online coach is right for me? If they ask no questions before you sign up, when you ask them if they can handle your case, they're not the right coach for you. If at any point in time they ask you to, I don't know, pay them a very weird way, like gift cards or, Venmo with only friends and family, and never mention goods and services and never tag them on social media, it's getting sketchier by the minute, guys. And by the way, I'm only bringing these up because I'm telling you that I've heard these horror stories before. If at any point in time you bring up a medical issue, a medication, or even just a standard issue you have with how long it's taking them to get back to you, or them not taking your meal preferences or workout preferences into account when they make your plans and shirking it off as, well, it is what it is, take it or leave it, they're not the coach for you, and they're probably not a great coach to begin with. So don't cry over spilled milk, because I'm sure that there is a coach out there for you, and I promise you, you want the one that's invested in your success, but more importantly is invested in your health in terms of physical and mental well-being. Now, the next episode, part 2, is the other side. As a coach, I've had a lot of horror stories over my time in terms of people that we deal with. So coming up next on episode 2, in the online coaching epidemic, the trouble client. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, the United States of America is always 100% natty, with a little asterisk next to it.